I assume this is a continuing effort on your part. It makes you want to kind of play, doesn't it? In lieu of our regular programming tonight, we're starting the first night in the mini-series based on my life, which we are, all of us involved with producing it, we are almost assured, or we feel assured, that this will be the supreme, the ultimate, the paramount example and probably final word regarding human biographies. And it is entitled simply, "He came from conditions twice as bad as you ever even heard of and became 4 times better than you'll ever be." No, the myth continues. Once, each person wondered what being alive was all about. But then they began to think about it, and thus most forgot about it. Yeah. And oh yeah, a few didn't. 3 stages of realization. Life as a tragedy, life as a satire, life as it is. The easiest way to track anything, including, God damn it, the transcendental, is along the path it has already been tracked. As long as you talk about things, they'll talk about you, and thus keep you distracted from their true nature. Is it that a mystic knows something that everyone else doesn't? Or that he merely knows and accepts everything that everyone else knows? Why this kind of activity is always so popular? A poem. A humorous poem. Because you can't be converted to reality. Riding with life as it is the true adventure of the mystical night. Several areas I thought we might try to sort of tie up. It has been mentioned of late. Our local diagram of man's nervous system. That being man and the spine, etc. The level of consciousness where the human brain begins to function, and man speaks, and etc. And man is man, and not simply an animal, or not simply a Homo sapien in a coma. We have the 2 levels of evolution. You have what we could refer to as the individual, willful evolution, and you have what amounts to the unknowing mechanical version. Should be also add the mechanical collective version. Now it is in that sense that up to this point we have all, everyone alive on this planet, that is the collective evolution of man. There has been such, and if nothing else, no matter how ill-formed someone may appear to be, no matter how uneducated, how unsophisticated, if they can speak, if they meet any requirement for being man, then they have evolved as far as the collective of humanity is going to evolve. It is the mechanical evolution that is all the stories of men being driven from paradise, from some past age of innocence. They have been driven to the point of evolving as far as the herd evolves. That is the kind of conscious, that is the kind of unconscious, non-conscious evolution of everyone. And it gets to a point and that's it. That's why you hear it pointed out on numerous times, numerous occasions that regardless of men getting distracted, there is nothing that you can do from the line down. From the line. Life has already evolved everyone up to that point. That is like the physical evolution, if you'd like to have it that way. In the same way that all animals have evolved as far as they're going. They're not conscious, but they have evolved into whatever they are, and they are perfect specimens of what they are. But that's it. And physically, for all interesting purposes to discuss, man has evolved as far as he's going to physically, which is one of the distractions of becoming interested in your physical persona, self-image physically, losing weight, gaining weight, working out, not working out, plastic surgery. That it is a unstated hope, dream, illusion that by doing such things that you will change your level of consciousness, whether men ever use those terms or not. That's the only reason they do it. They can say, well, I lose weight because I want to be more attractive and pick up more people of the opposite sex, which is the truth. And it's so close to the truth that that is not even sufficient nowadays, because that sounds too sexist, too crude. There's always the tacit implication that by so doing, by changing myself physically as much as possible, I will in fact be a better person. Not just a better looking person, but a better person. And it's not true, which is why it's so popular, because it doesn't upset anything. Everyone has evolved up to that point. Humanity has. And as I said, for all intents and purposes, there's nothing that's going to vary from this in your lifetime, so I can say that humanity physically is not going to evolve anymore. Life has taken everyone to that point. You're there, it was a free ride. After that, it's a matter of individual effort. And they are two distinct things. And several items that we've covered, as I said, let's see if we can tie together. One is, let me give you another story, like another myth. A kid, archetypical, prototypical. A kid somewhere throughout history, as far back as you can think, and right up until today, he fits all categories. A kid somewhere has the mystical urge. After pursuing it for some length of time, he begins to read about, most likely, or hear about, but he begins to read about descriptions having to do with the great mystical effort, the great work, and it says something along these lines. It will say that that the work, the mystical tradition, the effort, the experience, the adventure, only exists if it exists in a person. That is, if he read it in a book, it was addressed to the reader, and it says there is no such thing as a great mystical work anywhere outside of you. And if you're reading this and you believe it's somewhere else, you're mistaken, because if it is not going on in you right now, then it does not exist. It is nowhere on this planet. Forget it. This kid, after having read that, and he had been thinking about things for a while, he's not a complete novice at this. He reads that and thinks to himself, this sure is a neat way out for would-be mystical teachers and writers. Well, I assume that some of you do get some of the implications. There he sits. He spent his money or his effort to go to the library, and he's reading this big book, and it's really, let's say, caught his attention for a while. This line shows up far on into the book. It's all about the great history, the rumors, the dreams, recorded reality of some great mystical effort, or the various strains. Maybe it's a whole history of the mystical work on this planet. And it really seems informative. It seems intriguing. It seems motivating to him. And somewhere toward the end, though, then it points out. Maybe it's already got his dreams going, whether that was intent or not. He gets his dreams all going about where he may go and how good it feels to know how far this has been going on. The writer traces it back to the Sumerians, to the first recorded history of the Far East, traces it through everything, points out how it is now a tacit part of all popular culture. And it is absolutely fascinating to anybody and encouraging, captious. That's why I call it a kid, because you've all been through it to some degree. But then it gets somewhere toward the end of this sizable tome. And it could have taken the kid years to do it, you understand. This could be an allegory about the book. It could be that he finally did it in his own head. But after the great period, years, months, some period to him, a great length of being encouraged, moved to consider it more, to think about it, then it's pointed out to him that regardless of all this, the work, this great kind of mystical effort, does not exist anywhere on this planet, directed toward the reader, unless it is in you now. Nothing new. But then the kid thinks. That's not all he thinks, but he first thinks, that is a pretty neat and easy way out for would-be mystical teachers and writers, whether that was the guys, the writers and authors intent or not. Somewhat on a side note, is another distinction between the mystical work, the mystical effort, even at the collective level, that is, visible strains of it. The distinction between that and just routine religion is that inside of just the overall shell of the mystical tradition is it can accept and embrace and tolerate that which religion cannot. That is, it can tolerate both believers and skeptics, and religion cannot. I bring this up because that's what the kid was doing. You understand? Because I gave you the myth that he had been already hotly pursuing it, and he was not just a dilettante in the effort in the field. So he was both a believer, but then when he read this, what I told you, that he thought to himself that, hey, what an easy way out for would-be mystical teachers. Then there's a certain kind of skepticism. If you can stretch your allegorical sight, if right now you popped into some, we don't have to name them, they're always around, but sort of societally acceptable mystical groups, the kinds that have been around enough that they're populated to some degree by unmarried men and women of at least middle age, and they sit around and drink tea and coffee and don't take hard drugs. They rent rooms from the Unitarian Church or some cheap hotel that's that sort of thing. They're the community considers them just harmless crackpots. That's what I mean by sort of socially tolerated or acceptable mystical effort. That it's not really anything going on, and yet they talk about, they read about, they perhaps even discuss over coffee and cake matters that are more esoteric than would be the norm in their neighborhood religion, in all organized religions. Within that, see, in organized religions, you know this, no matter who it is, what religion it is, religion in the widest sense of the word, but in the most narrow sense, if you've got to start from a hard, specific example, the religions will not tolerate skeptics. If you're going to be a skeptic, get out and go join the atheist union, or at least the agnostic society. But they simply do not want it. They may tell you that they'll pray for you and hope that you get better, and they'll ask God or Allah to open your eyes, but they're not going to have a church service of any kind, a religious organization, and you be an open skeptic. They will not tolerate it, and they can explain it, I'm sure somewhere in the Quran and the Bible, and if they just got a pamphlet that God wrote for them, somewhere in there they'll be able to find something that says, you're not supposed to do that. It's nothing else to say, thou shalt not make our religion mad, which nothing else will always cover it. The Lord said, do not buggeth us. Well, when I said you could stretch it a little bit, you understand even a political party. If you start attending meetings of the young fascists, and you kept hollering, you people, you're on the wrong track, we should be some new form of communism, not fascism, boy, that's done for. They're not going to stand for it. They just will not. If you join the Fiction Lovers Book Club of Omaha, And all you keep doing every meeting is saying, don't you people ever talk about nonfiction? I mean, this is just stuff people made up. They're finally going to say, well, go somewhere else. They simply will not accept it. It's just the way things are. I bring that up because I know in religion that may sound as though it's a bit more important. But anyway, religion will not tolerate skeptics. Any religion. Mysticism, even at its crudest public level, will. But it's also an interesting, I'm not using that as just a selling point for collective, part-time, would-be mystical groups. Because it has an interesting aspect that has to do with the individual. It will tolerate both believers and skeptics. If you went down and found some fairly, if you went right now and attended some mystical organization, and the advertisers, they have a phone and a place they meet once a week at a library, at a bank, that sort of thing, and you go there, and you will find, generally, if you find one big enough it will, you will find that within the group there will be people who are firm believers. It's always centered around somebody's book, somebody who's long gone and dead, but somebody's effort, somebody's interpretation of some other mystical or religious tradition. At any rate, you will get there, and if you talk to the people, you will find that there will be, of course, plenty of people there that says, yes, our great leader, the great woman who went to India and wrote this, or the great guy that died over in Australia while trying to find so-and-so, and they'll say, God, his ideas, what he taught, his interpretation means everything to me, and yes, I'm not a fanatic, but I am a firm follower of that. That's why I'm here. Why else? But in that same group, you will find that there'll be people who go, I don't know. I've always had my doubts whether she actually went to Tibet, if you don't know the truth. And I got a feeling that some of that stuff she just made up. I don't think she actually talked to people up in caves, or I don't think that guy actually went necessarily to Australia for the purpose of trying to track down some aboriginal gods or some way that they fall into dreams and talk to spirits. I think a lot of that, he could have been on drugs, because I've heard some other rumors. But you understand, it's not an attack directly. It's not an out-of-hand dismissal of it, because they're there. Except they will say, I'm not so sure. Some of it I like and some of it I don't. This is not, you do not find that to the same degree in religion. I point this out now because that's of no consequence. The thing is, a real would-be mystic has that in him or her, which is what the kid represents in my myth. That he is both mystic and believer and skeptic. Because to ever get to the right point in this kind of mystical quest, you've got to actually think about, consider, study, ponder, what the hell is this all about? You cannot simply go into it on the basis of being a believer. You can't be converted to it, and you're not really born into it. Of course, you are wired up in such a way that somebody will end up being attracted to this or reading about it. Well, when I say not born to it, if you were an absolute, do you know the word fanatic? It did not originally have necessarily the overblown, overdone connotation it does now. It just, at any rate. But if you were now actually fanatical about something, you could not be a mystic. You are not born that way. Those who end up doing this, they are not fanatical about it. It's not just an instant conversion that they suddenly hear about Zen, or they hear about some mystical school, some mystical tradition. They just read about it and go, that's it! Now you may have had some sort of similar feeling, but you do not fall into that kind of St. Peter or Paul, whoever it was, dream on the way to Damascus and just fall down and suddenly go, yes, that's it, I am a Christian. And after that it's, don't fuck with me. Don't fool me. That it is not that kind is what I mean by a real believer. That kind, you cannot be a real believer and ever get to the right position with this. You have to be both. You have to be that kind of sort of socially acceptable, community tolerated kind of crackpot fringe group meeting at the library. You've got to be that yourself. That it's not a bunch of absolute fanatics over whatever mystical tradition they believe they're following, or some guys, if you've never even heard of it, somebody's idea, somebody's book. You cannot be that. And you can't be a complete skeptic. That's obvious. You can't say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure any of this is true. You can't be that. But you've got to be both. It cannot be on the basis, see, if you're a believer, If you seem to be just a born believer, is what I was insinuating with the Christian story. I guess it's Paul. It was supposed to have been just a real ne'er-do-well. Anything but a Christian was on his way, I think, to kick some Christian ass. And falls into some kind of swoon out there in the hot sun, walking somewhere, goes into some sort of fit. And when he wakes up, he is converted. Which is, of course, an old story. I wouldn't pick on poor old Paul. It's in all religions, that instant conversion, which is, again, that kind of dream and illusion that is necessary for people to believe that something happened or can happen to them el pronto. That is what constitutes ordinary religion. That is what constitutes the backbone of all collective organizations that holds sort of the islands in the great cohesive ocean of civilization, spread around religions, politics, governments, and cultures. But within each one has to be a kind of almost exclusive club of believers of whatever it is. It could be people that just say, our only salvation is not religion, but is the arts, or even music. But if you go there and there's a club, the music will save humanity, society. You go there, you're not going to find people that go, well, I like music, but Jesus, we're overdoing it. Those people, they finally, or shortly, will be dismissed. Life, it just works out, those kind of ooze out like a bad pimple. Those involved with what historically has always been considered to be mystical traditions, etc., also, notice this, are accused by the collective of the very thing I'm saying they're not and cannot be. They're accused of being fanatics. History even relates, according to the collective versions, that those that seem to be involved with such as this are singled out as being, hey, they overdid it. In every religion, you're going to find some story, all the major religions, of somebody who actually got so carried away and went off and fasted or did some kind of weird mystical stuff, and suddenly came back and said, I am God. That's what they usually hear. He'll say things like, I found who God is, and he merged with me. Or something like that. And it's always, they say, there it is. He should have stayed here with the rest of us. There is safety in the collective. We all get together, and it's as though the church together, the small c, the church together, the body politic of religion, keeps everything sane. We have enough input, enough discussion, enough interpretations that we do not go overboard like these guys. They go off by themselves, these hermits, these guys upon, they quit coming to church. They go off and say they're going to in some way figure this out for themselves and going to actually go to heaven, go to paradise, get reborn before they die. See, that's what happens. They become fanatical. They're accused of the very thing that they're not. The very thing they cannot be. Because you cannot be fanatical. You have to be a believer and you have to be a skeptic. And that's just two terms of a polarized reality. The thing is, it is not sacrosanct. It is not something that you're converted to, and it's not something that you suddenly are blinded and go, ooh, I see the light. Now I see the truth. If you do that, you become converted to religion, no matter what you call it. But you're no longer in the effort, because it is not suddenly something that you see that has a name like, ooh, there is a God, or ooh, I realize now I am a Christian. Ooh, I realize now we are all Muslims. If you do that, you've turned into a religious person. So the kid, after being, in the first part of the myth, after being this real believer, then turns in, or activates the side of him that is now skeptical, which is what is exemplified by, in the story, of him hearing that if the work exists, it exists in you, or it doesn't exist. Anything other than that, forget it. You're dreaming. You're out of your mind. It's a nice story, but grow up. If it's not in you, kid, forget it. And he reads that. And we're not saying there's not any basis for that, but he reads that and he thinks, amongst other things possible, that is a neat way for these guys to weasel out. That'd be a neat way for a guy who's made me buy or read this book, and I've gone this far, spent 2 years, 20 years, $40, $42.50, buying, reading, pursuing this book, getting all excited, thinking, God, if I could just find who wrote this. And then he comes up with this thing again. Now, it's not an attack yet. He just says, here it is, and he comes up with this. that makes me want to go find the guy or find his grandson or whoever's carrying on the tradition. And then he says, forget it. Because if it's not in you, it's nowhere. That is almost a skeptic's ultimate wet dream. Like, boy, if you wanted to weigh out yourself, there it is. That if you had been a believer too long, if you had been interested positively in this sort of activity too long, and you were confronted with that, and you were like my kid in the story, then you've got your way out, almost like, oh, come on. And you could have read it a long time ago and forgot it. You could have read or heard about it several times since then, and it didn't really cling to you. And then suddenly one day you read it again or you hear it, that if this is not in you, if it's not actually in you, if you're not doing it inside of yourself, the rest of it's a dream. No matter how it appears, no matter if you're in a monastery, no matter if you're in a cave with strange lights, and weird noises at night, and the guy in a turban that sometimes when the light's just right, in the cave he appears to float off the ground. Never mind all that. Never mind all that. If it's not in you, the rest of it is just a dream. It's magic. You're hallucinating. You're nuts. And the kid, playing out a certain part, thinks, not only is that an easy way and a neat way for them to weasel out of would-be mystics, that is guys that talk a good game and then can't do it, or can't tell me how to do it, then they say, well, now you've read my book, or you listened to all my teachings, but now, it's not out here, it's not in me, it's not in what I said. If it's not in you, it doesn't exist. He's not only saying, hey, that's a pretty cheap and easy way for them to weasel out. That's nothing. That's turning off a used car salesman, with your clicker on the remote. What he's saying to himself is, boy, is that an easy way out for me? Because I can take this skepticism one step further and go, wait a minute, finally the scales of delusion have been peeled from my young eyes. Of course, it could be 50 by then. My young eyes, now I see it's been a trick. They keep talking this, and now it finally strikes me. They've said this before, and I never heard it. They're saying if it's not in me, it doesn't exist. Well, if that's true, what the hell do I need them for? But then notice you're also having to explain, well, why did I spend 40 or 50 years? Why was I so stupid, if that's the truth, if that is the punchline? Then who's going to win the stupid award for the century? I'm going to blame them. I was stupid enough that I've gone this far, and it suddenly struck me, and I've been hearing that and reading that for 50 years, and it suddenly I thought, wait a minute, I hear it. They're saying if it doesn't exist in you, it exists nowhere. There is no such thing. Forget it. What he's pointing out is, what a way out for me to finally decide, I've been living in a dream. I've been living in a dream within a dream. The whole idea of being able to individually change yourself almost to the physical level. Not the one that shows. You can do that at the gym. Physical level. Tempted to say genetic, but I won't do that because it's just an outright lie. No need to lie outright when you can do it subtly. The kid is saying, playing the part of this kind of skeptic, he is saying, what a possibility right here. I could accuse them of having misled me and now trying to weasel out. That is, them. The whole idea of the mystical tradition. Of course, he could be blaming it on whoever wrote the book or one person, but the kid would be too wide-eyed for that. What he's saying is, this whole idea, it has been a trick of life. There's been some kind of, who knows, meaningless canard that started within the bowels of life as it grew through man that had this idea that there's some kind of great something you could do individually. I've been fooled all this time. Thank God I saw through it. What he's saying is, there's a possibility. I could now get out of it. Everyone can get out of it. No one needs going further, because there is as far as you need go. There is as far as life now and any time in the future that has any interest to anybody alive now, that's as far as life wants you to go. If life wanted you to be any more conscious collectively, if it wanted you to be any more humane, any more peace-loving, any more charitable, any more of whatever the good stuff is, I'm going to have to tell you the truth. I won't even lie to you. Life would make you do it. Collectively, not you individually, which again is back to one of the great tricks that life does, because everyone, we're talking about ordinary people, they believe it is an individual responsibility. and they can't do it. Which relieves you of the responsibility. You understand? I got to do it again, eh? At the collective level, no one is going to evolve any further. The herd is not going to be transcendental. Lightning does not strike. Some transcendental, some mystical lightning bolt never hits a herd of cows or sheep. Never, never, never. Not as long as they stay in the herd. They keep going to higher ground if we're going to play that kind of three-dimensional topography. Every generation they keep moving from the valleys and they get a little higher to the plateaus and up to the mountains. But that's as far as it's going. But then individually, people take the responsibility that, yes, I should be more humane. Well, why aren't you? Well, I don't know. You understand? You're relieved. You can be sitting there and you hear about some terrible, the violence going on in the world, and somebody on the news, a commentator says, well, what we need are better jobs. What we need is more community action to talk to young people and set a role model so that they won't be so violent. And you think, God, that's true. And the person next to you says, why don't you do something about it? You say, well, I ain't got time to do anything about it. I'm working 4 jobs now. I contribute money to the church. You understand? If you take the individual responsibility, which the collective is forced to take, that is part of what the mind is for, and you're forced to take it, then everyone knows that you can't do it. Everyone knows that collectively, all cows and sheep know that things are not going to change. That's why they talk about it. That's why they say, by God, we got to change. And the whole herd goes, what would ever be a positive moo or bad? They go, yeah, or whoever you're next to. And then everybody stops. They just wander on off because they know they're not going to. But as long as you say we should, and everybody goes, yes, then you're relieved. If life wanted any differently than that, life would do it. It is whether an individual that has any interest in such as this wants to do it. It is not necessary, and you cannot do it by being converted, and you cannot do it with some kind of blind pursuit of it, much less obedience of it. If you thought that you're going to find some kind of mystical school somewhere, the whole idea of finding some iron-willed guru or teacher, and you'll submit yourself. It all fits and sounds great, but that requires that you be a believer. You cannot be a skeptic. They will tell you, put yourself in my hands. Then take all that and turn it back on you. What does your own thinking and your own consciousness say? You've got to be able to, you understand when I say think about it, you've got to be able to sit down and not criticize, it's not that, and it's not to find some reason to support it, but the whole urge and hunger that drives somebody in this, you've got to be able to sit down and almost clinically, not in any specific way. There is no specific way, there's not one part of it, but you've got to be able to be that kind of sort of loose-knit, nascent mystical group that's composed of people who want to be real believers, real fanatics. They want to be. And then you got a group over there that are not actual critics, but they're skeptical. They keep coming. You've got to have both. You've got to be able to do a kind of running, non-stop, clinical, cold-blooded, objective analysis of what this is. There was also an item the other night that said that a man found himself in touch directly with life and asked life. It was a guy that had been trying to think and reflect on matters philosophically throughout his life, and then found himself one day in touch with life and said, asked life if life would mind if he tried to think about a certain matter, pick out anything you want to, a certain matter, in a particular way that the guy described to life. Would you mind? Would you care if I did it that way? You can take what the inference being, no reason he'd do it, and life said, no. That's why you're a man. Is you can think about anything, or you can try to think about anything any way you want to. That was the original. Now could I refer you back to something else we've mentioned in the past, that people can be, ordinary people, out in a political setting, can be given the right to vote. And apparently become some sort of progress. A tyrant, a king. Well, a past tyrant, of course he's now. That's giving the impression that he is reformed. But they can give the people the right to vote as long as the king does the counting. Which is That's one of the oldest, well, for you history buffs, or just you people who are fairly well read, would you notice that you have never run across that? I mean, kings and tyrants are accused of all kinds of things. It's going on today. There's one right today on the news happened, something similar. But it's an old story of the king or some tyrant say, all right, we'll have an election. And they get the election, you know, he said, all right, we're going to have a free election, and it's me against the opposition. My brother-in-law is going to run against me or somebody. And so they start counting the votes, and they realize they're going to 2-1 against the king. The king says, screw all this, and he goes and shoots him. He says, no, we've got problems. We're going to have to, we'll do it. Don't talk to me. We'll try it again sometime. We're just not ready. Now, that's common. But what I just described, you have never heard. There's no written history. The king goes ahead of the time and says, all right, let's start having a free vote. I mean, you people are getting upset. By God, I can see, it's the 20th century or the 15th century. Or this, by God, it's nearly 900 AD, so hey, let's get with it and be modern. Free vote. And let them vote. Don't stop anybody. Come up, vote anybody you want to. We won't have poll watchers. You can vote in secret and anybody you want to. That is great. People are just delighted. All you got to do is count the votes. In case you think, I'm insinuating it happens, but I was about to give a little, you just never hear about it. I was about to give one little small teeny side bit of, if you're interested, political humor or insight. Any of you a member of a major labor union? Yeah. At any rate. A tyrant, a ruler, can let the people free to vote just as long as he's in charge of tallying the votes. That's all that matters. Life, man can be given what appears to be choice. And of course, talking about mental choice is always up at this line, not physical choice, because there is no such thing as physical choice. That's why you can't evolve, if you want to look at it another way, any further than that. The body has no choice. It is only intellectually that there is a possibility of this kind of bifurcation, of it splitting out and increasing, and getting more complex, even mechanically. That is, even on a collective level. But below that, there's no choice. Not if you're sane. There's no choice as to what you eat, when you sleep, how much you sleep. Within certain, you understand what I mean. You don't have any choice. There's none to think about. The possibility of change, the possibility of growth, evolution, is only where there is the possibility of some choice. Now, collectively, man has the appearance of choice. That you can go, well, I'm going to quit being a Christian. I'm going to convert to Islam. I'm sick of voting Democratic. I'm going to try the Republican Party. I don't like my job. I don't like living here. I'm going to move to another state. You can think of anything you want to, and apparently is a choice. Man can have this apparent choice just so long as life still gets its way and has the final say, which is what it does. It turns once you see it for yourself, it turns the appearance of choice into the same situation as I submit you would see if you need a way to look at it, and something to clothe it with would be that you might recall my description that a king, a ruler, a tyrant, anyone in charge, a sole despot of some sort, a monarchy of some kind, read what seems to be your personality, your dominant thinking in any particular area at any particular time. That thing can apparently give way and give choice. It can apparently let believers and skeptics alike, they'll give them some hearing. Like, well, okay, I'll consider both sides. If there is apparent choice, like, well, maybe I should stay with my religion. Maybe I should go back to my father's religion. I've had 20 years now wandering from here to there. Maybe that kind of appearance of choice can always be tolerated in man intellectually, just as long as life has its way and gets the final say. That last part is sort of unnecessary, since what choice do you have except for this? When men believe they have a choice, that last part is not part of their thinking. They would say, well, that is mutually exclusive. That if life itself is the one that has the final say, then we actually have no choice. Now, I didn't tell you to put it that way. See, that's what happens to ordinary people that carry it too far. I didn't tell you to do that. There was another item, see if we can tie things faster, that pointed out, was using the terms conservative and liberal, and it said that politically speaking, in an allegorical sense, that life needed conservatives and liberals the same way as a man needed two legs to walk. Rhetorically speaking, I will again assume, we'll all assume that you understand that that has nothing to do with politics. I just used it as a known example from which we may dive off the cliff and then get back to something more important, because there's conservatives and liberals in every area. In art, science, religion. It's just that I guess some of you might find that or think that today we're in the midst of a revival, or some of you may even think it was just something new. Great talk radio and panel shows on television and the print media discussing the great struggle not only here in our country but now throughout the world. The breakdown of old regimes and old philosophies and Marxism's about gone and etc. And it's just more now just a political, theoretical battle, struggle for the minds of man between conservatives and liberals. And they mean it politically normally. But you do understand it doesn't even take a rocket scientist hairdresser to realize that there are conservatives and liberals everywhere. In fact, then part of the thing, although life uses them, is part of the binary polarized fuel running in this three-dimensional world on which we are so honored to be guests. Thank you. But it also serves a purpose in man indirectly, as always. It's like the twin comforts. Registered trademark. Don't try to steal that out there in the audience. The twin comforts of hearing conservatives detail how much better things used to be, and hearing liberals describe how much better they could be. Which in the broadest sense of the term is what that amounts to. It's been called other things in the past. And men have been referring to this dichotomy all the way from contemporary times of modern day social liberals all the way back to the Greeks of the humanist philosophers using a Western basis. But there is this continuing comfort that goes on, and it goes on in you, of course, but it apparently goes on out here, and it is what appears to be the conservatives, whatever they're called, but nowadays that's the general term, the conservatives and liberals. They describe, usually in tear-drenched, gut-wrenching detail, how much better things used to be, which you can become famous as an intellectual, sophisticated, well-dressed, well-educated, verbally adroit, conservative. But you're always in a kind of defense of the past. They do merge, as all things do. It goes from a defense of the past right up to, on one side of the line, if we're looking at the present, the status quo, then it's like, if this was the line right there where that break is, then conservatives, looking at it this way, would be moving up, and they got one foot always defending the past, always talking about, which is very intriguing, if I have to point that out to you, how terrible, how much better things were, and of course, just a side thing, it doesn't take much to point out how terrible they are now. They're not as good. But anyway, his foot will come right up where he stands, right up to the status quo, because that's part of it. Whereas what is normally referred to as a liberal is talking about how much better things could be. Going this other direction, considering this a temporal line of time, two-dimensional representation, but then his foot's right against the liberals over here. They're both partially in charge of helping keep the status quo stable. But there is great comfort, which is the intrigue, which is what some of you hear as jokes and satires and fingers and stuff done to it around here, some of the little jokes I make, but of describing how much better things could be. Because it will get anybody. All you got to do is just lapse into a small coma. Ordinary state of consciousness. And just anybody can walk out. You're just sitting there and just let's say you got no great headache and you've had something to eat in the last few days and you're just sort of in a normal state. And somebody come out and says, life is not so bad. And you're going, oh, yeah. They got some nice, in fact, they said they're going to bring down the retail price of the Corvette. We're here that there's some chance we'll get taxes cut. But coming over here, I heard about some young kids that just walked into a supermarket and shot an 80-year-old lady because she looked at them funny as they were beating up the girl behind the cash register and taking her money, and the old woman looked like, and they'll start about that. And so, and that reminds me, when I was a child, and of course we're assuming that you've got to be adult. You got to be well into your 20s nowadays, maybe 30. And the speaker says, in fact, that reminds me, when I was a child, we're now finding teenagers and younger committing murders. When I was a child, we thought if a teenager said something like darn, the whole community would just go in an uproar. Where I came up, in the crowd, we go, yeah. And as far as robbing and stealing, when I grew up, the kind of area where I did, and it wasn't that long ago, we could have walked in a store and the cash register could have been open. Somebody had to go to the restroom or something and accidentally left it open. We would have probably walked up there and stood beside it to make sure that somebody didn't come by. We'd have closed it. I mean, as far as stealing, it wouldn't even cross our mind. Am I right? And you go, yeah. And they keep on and on. It doesn't take a little time. And all you got to do is be in an ordinary level of consciousness, collective consciousness. And you do start thinking, God damn, what the hell's happened to life? No matter who you are, where you're from, all you got to do is be well into your mature years. That is, your hormones are beginning to wear out. Somewhere close to 30 at the probably latest now. But you do understand. You can turn on the news and just anybody. That is the comfort, though, of a so-called conservative in their area, and I could do it in art, and I could do it in other areas, but politics just about wraps it up to most people, the description. And to describe how much better things used to be. Not just 1,000 years ago, but in his lifetime. And you think, geez, that's true. We never heard about teenagers killing people. We never heard about 8-year-olds raping somebody. We didn't hear about your neighbor sending in fact your local priest as a child molester or his own crack. We didn't know what crack was. To us, dope was like a beer. Then you can hear a liberal, but you're speaking for somebody else, and he can start dwelling on and detailing how much better things could be, which is just the other side of the coin. But he can start saying, yes, we have too much crime. You understand, he's side by side is the way it works. And he almost picks up where the conservative got through with his comforting part. And he picks up, yeah, the crime. There's no doubt things, he does not dwell on they used to be better. He's saying, yes, we've got these problems, but. And then he starts mentioning how they could be better. And it's always, whether it be in politics or anywhere else, but it's always solutions that will not work, that nobody can do. But it's always, in the same way that the past wasn't that much better. It's not that it was true, but it is comforting. And it's based on reality because the parade does move, and it is going somewhere. But those who would qualify for the label, just ordinary, of liberal, they're describing how things could be better. But if they just say, well, things could be better, and you go, well, boy, I hope so, how? You go, well, okay. And then they start. And nowadays, well, it's always been, but nowadays it's more specifically put as governmental programs. That is the collective joining in. That, well, there's no doubt we have got violence at an all-time high in our country, in our world. And you go, yes, we do. And there's no doubt we've had enough statistical research done to show that it's mostly people who commit violent crimes who hold lesser paying jobs, even if they're employed at all. You go, okay. You can't think about it real deeply, but you go, okay. They go, so we have got to get a handle on crime and violence in our society. So there's no doubt. I mean, this is just the truth. I'm just going to tell you people, it can be better, but we're going to have to, in some way in the public, probably, sector, the government help, we're going to have to start seeing that everyone has a decent job. We're going to have to start seeing that our children are educated. We're going to have to start seeing that people who have not had the benefit of the culture, blah, blah. You understand? It's not that that's going to work. I'm not even saying it won't work or do work. It's not going to happen. That is, things are not going to change the status quo. Why do you think it's called the status quo? Don't think hard on it and make yourself look bad. Why do you think it's called the status quo? Why do you think reality is stable? Why do you think most people are sane? What do you think sanity is? Why do you think that right now in some parts of the world, always, there's a pocket right now of previously, apparently, civilized people who are now slaughtering themselves this minute? Just, God knows why. They just, nowadays you can see the pictures, run home, watch TV at night, and they're just slaughtering each other. So there's always that, but that is insane. That is condemned by the collective world, because that is not part of the status quo. It's an anomaly. The status quo is the status quo. That is, nothing is going to change dramatically. Where it does change is where it's condemnable, where it is anomalous. So the liberals, their part of the comfort is that things could be better. That's the general theme. But I'm just pointing out that does not change anything, any more than conservatives saying things used to be better. And even if you find yourself, all right, I won't stand over here, they're right. I don't have time for the rest of this. And of course, we'll say half the world is composed, if they're interested in politics, we'll say half the world is conservatively bent. And so they say things used to be better. So half the world goes, yeah, that doesn't change anything. After that, the rest of it is just, it's like entertainment. It's like you play everything that you know by hiding, and then you begin to fake it. You say, well, here's some of his lesser known works. Well, you know, JB comes out and he sings all the songs he knows, or his voice gives out, and he begins to dance a little bit and goes off stage, and you think, well, he'll come back, it was good. You know, somebody said, well, he was only on 5 minutes. And you think, well, the point is, once it's established, once the show, once a conservative, once that view, once that energy, if you're interested, hits life, at some particular time they say, my friends, I hate to be here. I'm not somebody to bring bad news, and I'm not all that upset by life. I'm going to tell you the truth. Life used to be better. After that, the rest of it, you understand, is filigree, it's filler, it's hamburger helper. Well, in the sense that no matter what he says after that, no matter how much you applaud, it's not going to change anything. You understand? It's just a dream. It's entertainment. Same as this kind of stuff. If it's not screwing, eating, or sleeping, it's entertainment. People take it quite seriously. That is, idiots. I'm sorry, ordinary people. Sane people take it seriously, the collective. And so the conservative, his comforting part of the show, the life show, the cosmic, earthly show, things used to be better. And if you're so interested and he's got your attention, after that, it's meaningless. I mean, it may be entertaining that he details on and on. It gets worse and worse of how things are getting worse and worse. That is, it gets deeper and deeper. He has more and more examples, more and more statistics. The examples get bloodier. They get more and more nauseating to the point you understand, but it hadn't changed anything. The show has already been established. The entertainment has already been started. That is, he says, things used to be better. Then you go over to the liberal side of this entertainment, which life is using, and it says, listen, things are not good. I heard what he said. I heard what some of that I can't deny the facts of what he said is wrong now. Now forget this stuff about how it used to be better. Now I don't have time to go into that, and that cannot be statistically proven, etc. But anyway, I will accept what my colleague said, this other side of the polarized energy running thing. Now, I'll accept what he said, that we've got problems. I mean, I'm not an idiot. We know we got problems. But hey, this is not the end of the world, and they're man-made problems, they're society-made problems. Therefore, society, us collectively, we're the cause of this. Even though you didn't put a gun in some kid's hand, it was you neglecting his education, you letting his parents have poor-paying jobs, being on welfare, not having the right kind of schools. So it's our fault. So if we caused it, we can fix it. That is, things can be better. So if you're inclined to that, the other half of the world, you go, hey, all right. You know, now we're getting somewhere. He says, so I'll start where he stopped. Because we can't go backwards. But now what my colleague said, the conservative, that we've got problems. Sure, we got problems. I'm not an idiot. I'm not dumb, but they could be better. If you're interested in that, that's the end of the show. And then somebody over here, this guy said, things used to be better. You go, okay. But after that, it's just, technically it's bullshit. It's just entertainment. This is the show already came on, if you want to look at it another way, if you don't understand how good reviews used to do. In other words, the Rolling Stones already been on. And after that, then they bring on the opening act. Because that is, James Brown has come out and done his show. He did it first and then left. And since then, it's been the band endlessly playing the theme song. It's been dancing girls. It's been a ventriloquist. You understand, the show's backwards. After that, it's just filler. All right, in the same way, the liberal says, all right, I will take what he said, part of it. that we have problems, because I know we do. But hey, we're humans, there are human problems, so we can fix it. That is, things could be better. That was James Brown. The show's over, folks. After that, you can stay and be entertained. I mean, it's all entertainment, but the star has been on first. After that, it's just filler. It's just make-do. They've already shown the feature film, and they're doing the cartoons afterwards. The previews of coming attractions, the ads for local car lot, and go buy some hot popcorn in the lobby. Both of them are helping establish and hold down the status quo. Life uses them both. One is not better than the other. They are both in charge, as I said. The 2 feet they do have in common that touch is holding down the status quo. Now, does anyone see how that's connected to how we started off? And it has, to a real would-be mystic, it has no interest of what's going on out there. Well, you got some, but what I mean is, you understand, not specifically on politics. All of that is reflective of being able to be a believer and be a skeptic. I've expanded it some, if you can hear it, that internally you have got to be able to see, you have got to be able, back to the second one, that life said, hey, you're a man. The guy said, can I look at the thing a certain way? I was going to leave it open-ended, and I said you could think up your own examples, but how about this? The guy could go right now. The common view where I'm from, I'm a professor at such and such college, and our view about a certain aspect of the problems of society or certain social programs is, and he describes a rather liberal one. He says that's the one where I am now, and it's not only where I am with my friends, it's where my brain is, it's where my mind normally is. And I've been thinking, to me that's just been the gospel truth, in quotation marks, that we should have government programs of a certain kind of liberal persuasion. But would you mind, because if that's what you are, you feel that's the only proper thing to be. That's the only decent human thing. And the guy was asking live, he said, would you mind if I tried to think about it like a conservative? Which if we're talking about an ordinary person, do I have to do all the theatrics? You know, he'd almost gag. He'd go, God, if anybody knew this. You know, they'd take away my parking space. I couldn't wear nice clothes from Land's End or whatever it is. Or they wouldn't let me back in the tea parties at Harvard. I'd be teaching at the University of Oklahoma somewhere. But he asked life, would you mind, instead of the proper view, the prevailing view, my view, if I tried to think about this one thing in a particular way? That is, in the opposite way. There's all the parts I didn't specify. And life said, no. He said, that's why you're a man. You can try to think about anything any way you want to. Can ordinary people do it? No. Are you nuts? But I had the guy in the Adam, he asked life, and I said, sure. Which life is telling the truth except it's an illusion, because an ordinary man can't do it. And therefore he relieves himself of the responsibility. He knows he can't. You've got to be able to think about everything, though. You've got to be able to try and think about. It may only be a split second. There's nothing to think about. I mean, not in some depth. If we take the examples literal that I just did, if I just did that you grew up in such a way, you don't know why, but you find yourself of a liberal political bent, let's say. I mean, to you it just, you might, by now, so I got no interest in politics, and yet if you watch your mind, if you hear the kind of things that will set your mind and get it running, you keep going back to whatever political persuasion, let's say liberal it was, and you think, you can't even see the benefit of trying to think another way. I mean, now, of course, I'm not saying there is. There's not a benefit in either one. But the idea of could I take an opposing view, I don't mean that there's something to say, well, that could be interesting. Maybe I'll go off for a vacation, or I'll take a sabbatical from my job, and I'll go off and I will try. I'll sit down and I'll get conservative books, and I'll read and I'll try to get their view. You're not a mystic. It may only take that long. Life said, that's why you're a man. Sure, try it. Oh, okay. That's all it takes. But you got to be able to do both. If you can think, there was another item. I said that by the time it's all over, some of you should be the point now. We've got any minute? Got time. Okay. The other night, they said that by now some of you should see that, or be able to hear that a real mystic could be simply defined as a true individual. I snuck up right here at the tail end to bring it up again. But combined with all this, the whole thing about being mystical, or having some superior, all-encompassing or cosmic consciousness or awareness, in one sense, is to be a real individual. You know, everybody in the collective says they are. And again, it's that kind of not strict. They're not, is why fashion is so important. You've got to try and stand out by meeting in with the hip crowd in some way that's possible. Because if you got any kind of job, you can go buy the latest clothes and say, now I'm an individual. Because I am now, well, bell bottoms came back and I got bell bottoms. I am an individual. I didn't go along with everybody else. A true individual is invisible, and it's not fashion. But if you can see that one true definition of a mystic would be a true individual, then you could also see that the mystical life, the life of a mystic, could be defined as simply where you're residing in all the facts, in all possible realities of here, which is the only one possible. Don't even waste your time worrying about below the level. But you are residing with all facts, not studying them, not debating whether you should be this or that, or a liberal, or a conservative, or a Christian, or a Jew, or you should be artistically active, or should you go ahead and just be a critic, in fact a Philistine. You've got to be able, a mystical life would be, a true individual life, is that you can live in the midst of all of the collective, and it can live in you. But you can be both, if it came to it. But after that, you're no longer just a skeptic and a believer there together. You're all of it. You'd be the conservative, you'd be the liberal, you'd be both of them combined, and then you'd be that which would consume them all. If you're not that, you're not an individual. The rest of it, you keep thinking, well, I've got a choice. I could be more conservative or more liberal. As long as you believe that, as long as you're on that level, you got no choice. That's why the collective is made to believe they've got great choice. And many kids, I didn't carry the myth that far, but many kids, and everybody, you go through one little quick phrase that you go through, understanding that the collective is not where it's at, and that the idea of choice that they have is not quite it. And for a split second, which could last, I guess, more than a split second, but a split second, you think, wait a minute, I'm moving into the area that I do understand what the mystical quest is, but wait a minute, I don't even have an illusionary choice. I got no choice. At least back there, I thought I had a choice, even though I say I don't, but now I got no choice. Yeah, but right then ain't forever. That does stop many people, I might add, as a conclusion. There's been many a person that got there, and that was finally their way out, like, wait a minute. You mean the great liberation is to have no freedom? No, no. Hey. Life looks after its own. Remember that. Well, all right, the truth. Life looks after itself.